Hi everyone, my name is Karel, and today we're going to be taking a look at electric power in From the Depths. So electric power is kind of a subset of power systems in From the Depths. We have already taken a look at fuel engine generators. Those produce a system called mechanical power, or at least that's what I call it. That mechanical power can translate into all sorts of things. You can use that to power, say, thrusters in the air tab. You can use that to power jet engines or helicopter blades or jet stabilizers or wheels, or in the water tab you can use that on propellers. There's all sorts of things you can use that mechanical power for. What we're going to be looking at today, however, is electrical power, and that is a power system that is not directly tied into the mechanical power system. Mechanical power can be used to generate electrical power, and electrical power can be used to generate mechanical power as well. But generally speaking, electrical power does not have as many immediate uses as mechanical power. So what's it good for? Well, if we have a system that has a lot of power spikes, that is, if we have, say, a jet with a lot of thrusters on the wings that only turn on when we need to roll, those jets are going to create a power spike when we need to turn. Well, obviously we're not turning the whole time here. So what you end up having is a system where my engine needs to be able to power those jets. So I need a very large engine if I need to power, say, five jets at the end of each wing. But those jets don't need to be powered all the time. So I am increasing my power requirements. I'm increasing what I need out of my engine. It's only coming in spikes. I don't need that all the time, so I don't want to increase the size of my engine a whole lot because I don't need that power 100% of the time. So what I can do is actually store that power in an electrical energy system and use that as kind of a buffer to pull out some extra power when I need it. Alright, so how do we do this? Well, the first thing to note is in the Resources tab we have these batteries. Batteries are moderately expensive, and if we take a look at the battery block here, we have an individual block that has 2,000 storage in it. Now if I remove that, you can see down on the lower right we have a bit of text that says no energy storage. If I place a battery block, that goes up to 2,000 storage. Batteries are linear, so increasing this with more battery blocks, I'm just adding 2,000 each time. If I have a 2x2x2 cube of battery, that should be a total of 8 times 2,000, which should be 16,000. So this form factor of battery is giving me 16,000 charge. If I have a large 3x3, that should be 3x3x1, so 9 times 2,000, that's 18,000. And down here we have a 4x1x1, which should be a total of 4 times 2,000, which should be 8,000 energy. So batteries are a way of storing energy. But how do we get that energy back out? Well, we have this electric engine block here, and what this can do is take the energy stored in the battery and use that to generate mechanical power. So we have electrical power stored in this battery, that is going into an electric engine here connected to the battery, that is generating mechanical power. It's worth noting that this single engine here will connect to multiple batteries that are attached to each other. So this engine is now connected to 3 1x4 batteries, and I can go ahead and throw some more batteries on top of here in whatever shape I want, create whatever oddball looking thing I want to out of these batteries. Worth noting that not every connection mechanism or placement of these batteries will connect to each other, but in general a lot of these are going to connect up to each other. Looks like I'm actually having some trouble with these. Huh, interesting. Yeah, these 1x4s aren't wanting to connect very well. That might be something for the From the Depths developers to look at in the future. In any case, these batteries do connect to each other in all sorts of crazy ways, and those are all connected then to this one electric engine rather. So if I destroy this and we go back to having just one battery connected to this, you'll notice that we're producing 320 engine power, sort of. That engine power is not listed in the normal engine power numbers, So if I was to actually place an engine down over here, let's just do a generator and a single cylinder and a single carburetor on top of that with an exhaust pipe leading off the side. That is a pretty minimalistic engine. And we're going to put down a bit of fuel so that that engine can run. So now you see we actually have the colored bar there, and this engine is producing 200 power. That's all well and good. But we over here have an electric engine that's producing 320 power. Now that 320 power is based on the size of our battery. If I take this battery and expand it, you'll note that the amount of power this battery is producing is going up. It's the number to the right of what the fuel engine is producing. And we're currently up to 1600 power. That is a lot more than that fuel engine is actually producing. So as you can see here, batteries rapidly increase the amount of power they produce, but they do it in a very linear fashion based on the size of the battery. Our electric engine here is going to always produce a linear amount of power based on the capacity of the battery, and since our battery increases linearly in capacity based on the volume that you have, that battery is going to increase the amount of power output that you have in a linear fashion. What that means is for each individual box of battery, for each individual volume of battery, we have a linear increase in the amount of power. So say if I had a battery attached to an engine, that battery produced, say, 5 power. If I add another battery block of the same volume, I'm going to get 10 power. And that's just going to keep expanding in a straight line. Now compared to fuel engines get progressively more and more efficient the larger you make them, and they tend to get more and more power in a superlinear fashion the larger you make them due to the interaction between carburetors and cylinders, and fuel engines and cylinders if you decide to go that route. So another consideration we can take a look at here. This battery is pretty bulky, and it's producing quite a bit of power. Say we don't need that much power in a spike. I can take a look at this electric engine, and there's this lovely graphical user interface here with a lot of stuff in it. Now, the electric engine output can actually be controlled both up here and via a variety of mechanisms. All of these presets and filters area down below here is going to be stuff that is very similar to movement mechanics. And we're going to get into that in a future tutorial. So for now, everything in this presets and filters I'm going to more or less ignore. What we are going to take a look at is the electric engine output slider up top. So you see here we have a total battery energy accessible in this engine of 120,000. That's 120,000 energy accessible to this engine. We have an efficiency of 100%, which means that over the course of extracting all of this power, the electric engine is going to produce exactly 120,000 mechanical power. Now we can convert a percentage of that per second. We can convert a percentage of the total amount stored in the battery every second. So we can convert 4,800 power per second, and that lets us create 4,800 power per second in total creation. So that's with an efficiency of 1. Well, what happens if we start playing with a slider? We can't overdrive it, we can't lower our efficiency to produce more power per second, but what we can do is lower this to get better efficiency. So if I reduce this to 67%, we have a efficiency of 120%. Notice that we are not getting 33% efficiency out of this. We're not getting a linear increase in efficiency, or if we are, it is slightly sublinear, where we are getting a little bit less than the amount of power that we're reducing. So right here we are reducing our resting output by 33% from maximum. And that's giving us 20% efficiency. We are up by 20% over the 100% baseline. So what that means is that we are producing 120% of the total battery energy accessible in this engine. We are producing 120% of this 120,000 power over the course of outputting the entirety of the energy in this system. So we have 2685 mechanical energy per second being produced, and we have 3216 in total power creatable. Well, what does that mean? What this means is that we are converting 2685 energy out of this battery per second, and we're producing 3200 mechanical power. That's interesting because we are now inputting energy into the batteries and it's coming out with more energy than actually went into the batteries. So if over here I have this mechanical engine producing 200 mechanical power per second, and let's say I divert all of that to go into batteries, that energy then will come over here and we will only be putting that energy into this battery. Now this battery then is going to produce 3200 power per second out of 2600 energy. And if I was to reduce this slider to the point where the engine can power the battery entirely, by bringing this down to here, let's go ahead and say that we're not probably going to be drawing on this battery 100% of the time. So 207 energy draw per second is probably acceptable. That's going to create a total of 384 power out of this battery. That's interesting. We are using an engine here. We're sending the energy to this battery, which is then producing 384 power out of a 200 power input engine. Obviously that's useful. So what we're doing here is we're trading the space, weight, and cost of the batteries in electric engines, and a little bit of damage resilience as well, because keep in mind we now have two systems that can fail instead of one, and we have to account for that. But we're taking all of those and trading them for extra fuel efficiency, because now effectively, even though this engine is only getting 83 power per unit of fuel when we're running it at full throttle, we are using 1.2 fuel per second. Over here, we are getting 120% efficiency, so we are effectively reducing that to produce 1.2 times 1.2 power out of that fuel. So effectively, we're increasing the efficiency of this engine by the conversion process. And in the process, we're actually adding a buffer here. So say this engine gets destroyed. It just gets completely wiped off the map. It no longer exists. Well, we still have all of the power in this battery. We still have that 120,000 energy rather. And that energy is going to be spat out through the electric engine. Our power systems do not fail. Our drive systems do not fail. Anything that's drawing this energy actually keeps running, though it will get progressively less and less energy as we run our batteries down. So that's the downside of electric engines, is as you draw on the amount of power in the battery, and as that battery runs down, you get progressively less energy out of the battery. Because the electric engine converts a percentage of the amount of power in the battery, and that percentage is being modified by our resting output slider here. Right now we are converting 8% of the power in the battery, or 8% of our maximum allowed power out of the battery, I should say. That is slowly drawing down the energy in here, and as that goes down, the percentage of that total that we have in the battery continues to decrease, so we get less and less power out of the battery each second. So that's one of the downsides of batteries, and it makes them a little bit unreliable as a power system because the output changes constantly. If you can't fill the battery entirely all the time, your power fluctuates in the amounts that you can produce on a regular basis. So that's the downside and kind of the weakness, but if you can afford to have your power output fluctuate slightly, batteries can be a very good way of increasing the efficiency of a system. So another consideration here is weight. Batteries are not light. If we note, the battery block here is 45 weight. If we take a look over at our fuel engine tab, a generator is 30 weight. Yeah, that's about fairly similar in weight, but all of these components over here are 30 weight, all of these heavy bits from the engine. The carburetor goes down to 20 weight, The supercharger is 20 weight. These turbos are back up at 40, which is fairly heavy. And then when we get into the exhaust pipes, those weigh 10. So those are relatively light compared to batteries. Well, when you're dealing with a battery-based system, you need a fairly large solid block of batteries. And that's going to be a fairly large solid block of 45 weight cubes. So that is going to be fairly heavy, and that can affect your flight mechanics, that can affect how much power you need to stay in the air if you're producing a flying vehicle, and that extra weight can just generally be a drag on the system. So what you're trading off there is extra space and weight for efficiency and essentially a power buffering system. So what I haven't mentioned here, there's a few things in fact, there's other ways of inserting energy into batteries. We have these RTGs. RTGs are a very interesting concept, and if you all haven't seen it, there's a movie out there called The Martian that explains RTGs and what these are in theory much better. And if you get the chance to read the book, I would very much recommend that you do so. That is an excellent book. Anyway, the RTGs are basically a very high-cost way of producing electrical power. So why would you want them? They're high cost, they're actually somewhat explosive, so if you destroy them, then they blow up and damage things nearby. And they weigh a lot, and they don't have a ton of armor, and they're extremely expensive. This 3x3x3 one is 5,000 materials. That's more than most engines. And it produces a lot less energy because, if you can take a look at this one, you can see it produces 675 energy per second. And it also adds temperature to the body of the vehicle, which makes IR detection much easier on the vehicle. So what are we doing with these RTGs? Well, the RTGs are essentially a way of generating free electrical energy. These things have no upkeep cost. They have really nothing associated with them at all. If I take off our fuel engines here that we've put on, we are now getting free battery energy. If I put something in that draws energy out of the system, let's say a shield projector, and we put a lot of power draw on that. Obviously we don't have nearly enough power output to run the shield projector. This is just as an example. So you can see here we are lowering our amount of energy in the system considerably. We're draining out our batteries quite quickly. What this RTG is doing is creating 675 energy per second and putting it straight into these batteries. Well, this electric engine is drawing a lot more than 675 power per second. So if we reduce this, and in fact I'm going to turn this shield generator off for a moment and let this charge back up. And in fact, if you watch in the lower right corner, you can see our energy and thus the mechanical power produced by the electric engine going up over time as this RTG feeds energy into our system. This is producing 675 energy per second. Let's go ahead and add a couple more of these just to speed things up. And let's go ahead and, just for example purposes, take out a few of our batteries. Okay, so we have a 40,000 power battery right now. That is producing 704 energy per second. We have 3 RTGs here. These 3 RTGs produce 675 power per second. And let's say we want to optimize this system. So we are getting a total of 1,875 times 3, which is going to be 225. So that is 2,025 power per second. So can we get 2,025 power per second out of this system? No, we can run our electric engine at full blast because RTGs are going to fill this battery faster than we can actually draw from it. So what we can do here is add some more RTGs, or more batteries rather, and we've doubled the amount of power we can draw out of that system. So now we're drawing well over our maximum. So what we can do here is start reducing this, and we are now getting, for 27% efficiency, we're drawing just under the amount of energy being produced by these RTGs, and we're producing just over the amount of power that's produced by the RTGs. So here comes another trade-off. Again, we've got plenty of battery space here. We can actually produce as much power as we want to from these RTGs. They're going into the batteries, they're getting run out the electric engine. We are effectively saving ourselves adding more RTGs then by having this amount of battery space, because we are producing an extra, say, 311 power in this total power creatable field. So what happens if we keep expanding on that? Well, we can trade some extra weight and space, we can throw more batteries on there, and now we are consuming 3,031 power out of here. Well, if we want a constant stream of power out, obviously we're only producing 2,025 power from this system. So if we bring this back down to, let's say, right about here, now we are operating at 130% efficiency, so we're getting an extra 30% power out of this system. We're now getting 2,600 power. That's almost another full one of these RTGs. Now if you notice here, we have these batteries. These are 1x4 batteries. These are 160 cost apiece. And we had to add a second layer of them in order to consume the power from these. Adding a third layer, we've added 5 of these batteries at 160 cost apiece. So we have 500 plus 300 is 800 total materials put into these batteries. These RTGs, these 3x3x3 RTGs, cost 5,000 materials. So we've put extra batteries in, and we've actually used up a fair amount of volume here. This is a 5x4, which is a 20 volume area, as opposed to the 3x3x3 rather, which is 27. So we're still more space efficient by adding more batteries. If I was to continue this and start adding more and more and more batteries, the efficiency that we're going to get out of this is going to be less and less each time. So more or less we're trading, as we add more batteries, more weight and space in return for not having to add as many of these explosive, expensive RTGs. So again, we have another trade-off there. This one can be optimized, however. If I keep adding these batteries and keep messing around with this slider in the engine, then we can eventually see that if I try and optimize this and try and keep us around 2,025 power, now we're up to 2,800 power. So I've added an entire extra row of batteries, and we've gotten, what was that, about 200 power? Let's see, before we were at a total of 2,592 for total power consumed, or created rather, and that's about 600 over our base, a little less than 600. So a little less valuable than an entire extra RTG. So that goes from a little less than 600 down to here. If we again optimize our output, we're getting about just over 300. So we've gone from 600 energy saved by adding that extra layer of batteries to 300. And that's going to keep decreasing as you keep going lower and lower with this slider. So the best thing I've found is to try and get a kind of an inflection point around 0.5, and that might not be the best inflection point here, or the best optimal point for the electric engine output. I might be entirely off on that, but that's what I've found is generally a good target. So if I keep this at 0.5, I've got total energy convertible per second is 2,400. So I want to produce, if I want to keep this battery volume constant, I want to produce 2,400 energy per second. Well, I've got 3 of these RTGs, they're producing 675 apiece, and so we're getting about 2,025 power apiece out of those, or total, rather. And if I want to get up to 2,400, then I need to produce another 375 power. Well, let's take a look at the other RTG sizes. We've got these small ones, we can use 3 of these. Let's get our mirror line turned off here. So I can use 3 of these, that's another 300, and then these are 50, So let's go ahead and overproduce just a tiny bit, and this amount of RTG will pretty much optimally fill this amount of battery. So this amount of battery is now constantly being filled. We can get 3200 power out of this system constantly. And to test that, we should be able to turn our shield generator on to full. And this is going to draw as fast as it can, and you can see we are not losing engine power here. We are not losing any mechanical power due to the battery going down. The battery is constantly being fully refilled. Now if I add my mirror line back in and start taking away RTGs, if I take away these two smallest RTGs, we should start seeing that battery power and the engine power drop very slightly. It's not going to drop much, but it is over time going to start dropping very slightly. If I was to take away one of these larger ones, you can see we're actually starting to lose power fairly consistently now. It's going to go down pretty slowly over time, but it is still going down constantly. So that's kind of how you optimize for RTG production of electric energy. And you can kind of do the same thing with fuel engine, but the calculations get a lot more complex due to how the fuel engines work and kind of the trade-off of how they consume volume to produce energy, if that makes sense. So let's talk about damage resilience here. Another big topic of electric engines, another big reason to use them, is because they are fairly resilient to damage. We have a system here that is producing electric energy, and if I was to, say, blow up a few of these batteries here, we're still producing electric energy. That's still going out just fine. We've lost a bit of capacity. We haven't lost the entire production. That's very important. When you have a fuel engine, you remember from the fuel engine tutorial that if we blow up some of, let's say, the exhausts and the turbochargers, that's reducing the effective cooling of the engine. That tends to blow up cylinders. So if you blow up a few blocks of an engine, especially if you blow up, say, a crankshaft block, that engine ceases to function. It destroys the engine. You're not getting any power out of it. Batteries do not work that way, and that's very important. If you blow up batteries out of a system, those batteries are fine. The rest of the batteries still produce power. They still exist. So, that's all useful information. But what happens if we, let's say, take some of these RTGs out, and so we're draining power out of the system fairly rapidly now. And I'm going to go ahead and bump this electric engine all the way up on output, so we're now actually draining power pretty quickly. So say we have a battery that's acting as a buffer system. Say we've got an engine that's just not functioning right now, and we're using the battery to power this shield as kind of a buffer. What happens if that battery starts taking damage? Well, if I start removing these batteries, you can see the amount of power in the lower right corner looks like it's actually jumping up. Well, the amount of power in the batteries is not actually changing. That's very important. When you destroy part of a battery system, you actually do not reduce the total amount of energy in the battery. What you're actually doing is destroying empty batteries, and it doesn't matter what battery in the system I take out of here, I am destroying empty batteries. The amount of battery in the system does not change. That is extremely useful in terms of damage resilience when you're using electric batteries as buffers. Also worth noting, when you place these, at least in creative, I'm not sure if this applies in the campaign, when you replace the batteries, they are replaced as full. So as I'm replacing these, you can see the amount of battery in the system going up. So those are a few notes on damage resilience. As you can see, batteries are very useful when you're talking about resisting damage and coping with it. So what else can we do to make systems more damage resilient? Well, as I've mentioned, you can use these as a buffer. If our engines take, well, let's say that we're not using RTGs here, or rather, let's say that we are, and two of these RTGs get blown up. We're now draining power out of the system at a fairly good clip. So repairing those RTGs is going to take time and materials. Let's hope we've got repair bots or repair tentacles on here. But in the meantime, our system is continuing to produce mechanical power. Our vehicle is continuing to operate. We're continuing to move. We're continuing to fire. Then let's say our systems get repaired. Well, now we're producing enough energy, we're very slowly recharging, and this battery is still acting as our buffer. It's still producing enough power to run our vehicle even as it's recharging. So essentially we're adding damage resilience here because our power systems can get blown up and the batteries will continue to operate the vehicle until you get the opportunity to repair those power systems. But that's not all. If we want to go the Billy Mays route, but wait, there's more. So what we have here is a system that can resist damage, but this system itself can take damage. And let's say that we have taken a bunch of damage on this battery. What happens if we add more batteries? Well, we can have completely independent subsystems of batteries. And all of these batteries are going to operate in more or less a linear fashion. So if I have two sets of batteries that are each half the size of this main battery, and let's go ahead and add an RTG back in here so that we can fill up our batteries. We have two electric engines that at 100% power should produce exactly half of what this larger battery produces in terms of mechanical power. And in order to speed this process up, this is a dumb trick, but I'm actually just going to replace a bunch of these batteries. That rapidly fills your power because the new batteries are placed in place of empty batteries, and they're placed with a full battery tank. So what we've got here, we now have 128,000 power, rather 12,800 mechanical energy being produced, in a total of 320,000 electrical energy stored. If I was to remove these two electric engines, we get exactly half of our power being removed. So you can see here these electric engines are producing exactly half of what this inner one is producing. That's important because that means we can spread these batteries all over the vehicle, even in ones and twos, and as long as there's an electric engine there, we have a system that is spread out across the vehicle and is producing a constant amount of electrical power. Now obviously these electric engines take up space, they're 30 materials apiece, so we don't want to overdo it. But what we have here is a system where all of these electric engines are going to be producing the output of this one large electric engine. So if we, let's say, remove this center battery, these are now a full replacement for that one larger battery in the middle. If a cannon shell comes in and blows up a battery, it's going to hit in one spot. It's likely going to blow up a significant chunk of that battery. If we get hit by, say, a cram shell with a lot of armor piercing and explosive and frag and everything else, it's likely going to blow up that entire battery. But if we have another battery on the other side of the ship, that battery is going to continue chugging along, going along its merry way, producing half of our power. So essentially we've doubled the resilience of our system by splitting the amount of power. You can't do that quite as well with fuel engines because of the amount of space each fuel engine takes up. But if I wanted to, I could run with a system that has one battery and one electric engine on each side of the vehicle, and then I could spread these little units all over the vehicle, front, back, left, right, center, top, bottom, everywhere. I can just throw them in wherever I have the space. And these effectively act as a power buffer, preventing me from losing power if my actual energy production facilities, say these RTGs over here, get destroyed. So, another thing you can do with electric energy, these can be used to transfer energy between vehicles. If I have one vehicle, say a fuel-producing vehicle that's got a refinery on it, that hangs back in our campaign vehicle, in a campaign scenario rather, that one vehicle can produce a lot of power and it can stay out of play. Let's say it's not armed at all, but it contains a huge amount of resource storage. It's got all sorts of fuel production facilities on it. It's got all sorts of repair and refit facilities. It can produce new vehicles. It's just your general overall utility vehicle for the campaign. It can sit back there and store up a bunch of energy in these batteries, and then it can feed that energy into the vehicles that are actually doing the fighting either when combat ends or even during combat if the vehicle can stay out of harm's way. Alright, so in order to do this, we're going to have to take a look at the E menu when we're not in build mode. And what we can do here is hit E. And here we have a fleet in the top left. We've got one vehicle that's a flagship, and it's got 96,000 energy on it. Well, what we can do here is hit the three dots on the right side of that, and we can say there's repairs, there's all sorts of buttons here, there's all these scrapping things. If we activate this resource view button, then we have all of these resource grids. Now what we can do is say I don't want to keep any energy on this vehicle. Now if we're producing energy on this vehicle and not on another, then that vehicle is going to drain out its energy supply. But if we say we don't want to keep energy on this vehicle, then the energy from this vehicle will get transferred progressively to the other vehicle. And you can set up groups here with these grouping tools on the bottom. Say I want to join with the green 1 resupply group. So let's come over here and build a new vehicle off to the side. And this vehicle, we're just going to, again, make a little flat platform here. And we're going to go over here and select some batteries. We're just going to plop some batteries down on here, and we're going to put a shield projector in to drain the batteries. And we're going to, boost all these parameters up all the way. Again, this is going to way overdraw the batteries, but for example purposes, we don't really care. And we also need an electric engine on the batteries in order to produce mechanical power, because shields consume mechanical power, not electrical power. So now we have two vehicles here. This one very obviously has no production of its own in terms of power, but it's draining out its battery. It's obviously not going to be able to sustain the shield. What we can do here, if we exit build mode, and let's stay on our vehicle here. What we can do here is go into the build mode, or the campaign mode rather, and we're going to take a look at our resource view. We can see here the battery power is very rapidly draining out of this vehicle on the right. And let's say we join that to the 5th supply group again, or rather this one green supply group. We can now see that is getting battery power from this other vehicle. It's getting it in chunks, it's getting it over time, so this isn't a perfect system. We're not going to be able to entirely power that shield generator from the main vehicle. But we can say we want to keep this one at full battery energy, and over time we will transfer energy into this vehicle over here, essentially draining the battery of one to feed the batteries of another. So what other considerations do we have when dealing with batteries? Well, some types of systems can actually use energy directly from batteries. We haven't done an advanced cannon tutorial yet, but there are some components here, specifically the railguns, that can actually draw energy directly from batteries. They do not use mechanical power, they use electrical power directly. There are a few of those systems around. They're not particularly common, but they do exist. So advanced cannon railguns are one of those options. Energy weapons, if you look in that tab, there's lasers. Those use mechanical power, oddly, but particle cannons use electrical power. So particle cannons are, again, going to draw directly from batteries, and the larger the battery you have, the more powerful of a particle cannon you have. So those are a couple of the systems that additionally use electrical energy to produce mechanical energy, or to produce output directly rather than having to go through that mechanical energy step. So I think that's all for now. If you have any other recommendations on things to cover or any other ideas as to what you could use batteries for, please feel free to leave a comment below. And looking forward to the next tutorial.